let's get into the Mark Cuban stuff, because that was kind of what was the catalyst for this most recent finding from Pablo Torre. Finds out that Mark Cuban said, well, hey, if they really wanted to circumvent the cap, then they could have just done this. And so Pablo said, all right, sure, let's look into that then. Sure enough, that's exactly what they found. That is exactly what they did. So
That's not how this came about. What you have to remember is that Pablo Torre spent 7 months researching this story before he ever released the first podcast. It's highly doubtful that he's uncovering any new material information at this time. Even the $20 million in stock options that was reported by Boston Sports Journal, I wouldn't be surprised if Pablo already knew that, and they simply got in on this story, added that additional release of information before Pablo was going to release it. Because keep in mind that Pablo already had subsequent podcast episodes planned. So Pablo right now is telling a story. He's not coming across this information for the first time. And it's not as if Mark Cuban is saying, hey, look here, and Pablo hasn't already looked here. So Pablo is doing everything very much intentionally. He has prepared for this. He is now giving us a story that is unfolding in front of us, and he has anticipated a lot of what has happened. Now, obviously, some of this is variable, and so when you have Mark Cuban insert himself into the conversation in such a definitive way, it's really just cueing Pablo to go ahead and react to what Mark Cuban is saying. But it's not like he's researching this on the weekend and he now has the information to counter Mark Cuban. No, he already has the information. And so I think that's what a lot of people don't quite understand, is just the work that's gone into making this story come across as simple and as easy as it does. This is the result of Pablo Torre extracting this information, piecing it together, and then presenting it so that it comes across as so easy to understand. And that's the only way that this story is as captivating and as powerful as it is. So, Pablo, make no mistake, Pablo has put in so much work ahead of time to make this story come across so seamlessly. So now let's go ahead. We're going to tab to Pablo.show. We are looking at the post where the investigation is initially announced. And I just want to point out that Pablo writes, which took 7 months. This took 7 months to put together. Pablo is a very intelligent guy, and he is making sure that the story is as entertaining, as captivating, and as perfectly laid out as it is for us. So it's all for our benefit. And now these different actors are entering the story, the different players in this story. And so we're seeing Pablo be cued by them so that he can present us information. So he already has the information ahead of time. And this is nothing against Carolyn, I think her name is Carolyn Fenton of Yahoo Sports Daily. Pablo has made this seem like it's very simple, and now it is because of what Pablo has done. But it's not as if he's furiously researching on the weekends to find this information out. He already knows ahead of time. And so this is Yahoo Sports Daily. We are going to come back to this, but before we do, let's look at this latest podcast episode from Pablo Torre.
Who can't question him on anything he's saying.
But the question he raised in that clip we played very deliberately, I think, is actually the one that I want to take seriously, because I think it's worth answering. What is funding this whole enterprise? How is this contract for Kawhi Leonard continually getting paid? And what documentary evidence and credible primary sources exist that allow us to follow the money through the lens of salary cap circumvention? And so the understanding that I have, Dan, given all of this across 4 episodes now, is that 2 things can be true. It can totally...
Okay, so there Pablo is laying it out. He's posing the questions. He's opening the questions, the ideas to the questions to the audience. So Pablo's helping us mentally work through this. Let's go ahead and play one more clip.
figurative players in the story. And so I want to take the advice of the other Cuban, my reporting's foremost public critic here today, Dan, because that good question of how did Kawhi keep on getting paid his $1.75 million installments, and who continued to put money in to the $28 million deal we've been arguing about this entire time in public, plus $20 million in equity in the company, a $48 billion secret deal, which is bigger than anything else we've heard of in the history of cap circumvention, leads me to a money trail that we're about to follow. And I think people are treating this, as Mark Cuban has been treating this, like kind of a true crime podcast. And the fact that there is no smoking definitive piece of paper that says, I'm doing the crimes, I'm doing cap circumvention with a signature on it, it allows people to fill in the blanks.
The reason he's able to relay this so seamlessly is because he already knows the information. And so Pablo has enabled this to come across as a thriller. It is a thriller now, but because of Pablo and because of the storytelling he's done, it's not just investigative journalism. Everything he's doing is purposeful and has led us to this point, so that we can now look at this new player, this new entrant into the discussion, who is Mark Cuban. So now let's go back to Yahoo Sports Daily and continue with Tom Haberstra, who joins the conversation, who now joins this episode.
Let's get into the Mark Cuban of it all and that chapter of this story and how this exchange between Mark Cuban and Pablo Torre led us to this most recent finding.
Yeah, I could not imagine that the league office was happy to see that Mark Cuban, who has been fined more by the league office than any other NBA owner in NBA history and has had his own share of issues running the Mavericks organization, is out here declaring, I am Team Ballmer from the get-go, and goes on Pablo Torre's podcast and has over 3 hours of conversation that was whittled down to about an hour. And I was like, man, the league office can't be really happy that he's out here defending in the public without kind of really thinking this through.
Did he not think it through? Does it not come across as inorganic at all that Mark Cuban is so vigorously defending Steve Ballmer and so continuously? Mark Cuban is acting as a proxy for Steve. So he's acting as the proxy defense for Steve Ballmer. How do we know that this isn't exactly what the NBA wants and needs and asked of Mark Cuban? Because there really would be no reason for Mark Cuban to insert himself into the conversation the way he has. He has definitely become a part of the story, whereas he wasn't a part of the story before. And so now he's doing a lot of work for Steve Ballmer and the NBA to try to diffuse this and make it seem like this story really isn't a story and that Pablo hasn't done his research, but Pablo has. And so actually, in defense of Mark Cuban, his defense is without merit. And so he's really having to defend without much to go on. And so he joins the Pablo Torre podcast, somewhat whimsically, and he's providing this defense, which was, given again that there's so much compelling evidence from Pablo. Mark Cuban actually did a good job with the nothing he had. The problem is that when you're defending something that is indefensible, you're going to be undermined, and Mark Cuban has. But he's out there and he's giving this best defense, and it's coming across as rather inorganic, especially as the days continue. We saw him tweet out originally. We saw him join Pablo Torre for really what was a bonus podcast. And then now we've also seen him join the Road Trippin' podcast with Richard Jefferson. And he continues to tweet to this day, doubling, tripling, and quadrupling down on this defense of Steve Ballmer while completely ignoring the evidence that has been presented by Pablo Torre, the very tangible evidence that has been presented by Pablo Torre. And so Mark, even despite the evidence, he won't concede really anything. I mean, there may have been a few points where he says, if this is true, but he won't concede that anything looks unfavorable to Steve Ballmer. So his defense is curious, to say the least, and has drawn a lot of attention. But it's the one that, if you think about it, the NBA needs at this time. They need a voice, they need a spokesman out in favor of Steve Ballmer. And so Mark Cuban is providing that voice. Now, I don't know that that's what happened, but that's what it looks like to me. So let's see if we can gather anything more from Tom Haberstraw.
Over the weekend, as Pablo pointed out, there was almost 100 tweets, thousands and thousands of words that Mark Cuban had written in defense of Steve Ballmer. And within those tweets, he laid it out pretty explicitly. Hey, if this was really cap invention, and I'm paraphrasing here, if this was really cap circumvention, then wouldn't you think Steve Ballmer would have invested more money and used these carbon credits to funnel money to Kawhi Leonard if this was truly cap circumvention?
So yeah, Tom is getting at what I was talking about, is that Mark Cuban he's trying to defend the indefensible. And so it's going to go poorly for Mark Cuban, but it makes me wonder, why is he doing this? Like, to me, it very much seems like he has been asked to defend Steve Ballmer because he wasn't a part of this previously. He's not even a majority owner in the NBA anymore. He's a 27% owner of the Mavericks, but still he's a prominent figure within the NBA sphere. He's very opinionated, but he has been so strong in his opinion and so insistent in his position that it's raising questions in and of itself. Why would he do this? And he's looking, now he looks ridiculous because he's trying to defend something, and Pablo Torre has all of the evidence. And what's problematic is there's not going to be a way to come back from this. So the old playbook is not going to work anymore. And we've seen the playbook roll out. And this time the NBA, and I'm presuming here, the NBA thought that it would be a matter of, hey, let's just diffuse this. We have other NBA chess pieces that come out. We have ESPN really tempering the story and stating that they don't expect much to come of this. They'll concede that, hey, like, Pablo did some really good work, but unfortunately, this is just not going to happen. There's just too much circumstantial evidence. There's nothing to directly connect the Steve Ballmer and the Clippers with salary cap circumvention. And Pablo, rather masterfully, has waited this all out, anticipated, and now he's drip feeding content. And now I talked about this in my previous video. Pablo is really setting traps because his content is such that it invites a defense, or it invites a reaction. He's getting the reaction. He seals the reaction in, and then he releases more info. So that's what going back to what I was talking about originally. Pablo's always had this information. He's not being caught off guard by any of the defense. In fact, it's the defense that's being caught off guard by him, but that is because Mark Cuban and Adam Silver and Steve Ballmer and the other NBA chess pieces underestimated Pablo Torre. But Pablo is extremely sharp, and he is also well prepared. So now what's happening is, despite the best efforts to bring this story down, right, to make it seem like not as big of a deal as it is, it's actually having the opposite effect. It's inflaming the story, and it's making this much, much worse than it would have been otherwise.